Cache-Maniacs.
GeoGearHeads.
I'm the bad cop, back with Daryl W4 on Beta.49, as we continue our Randomize show from last week.
Thanks to the great gifts from Magellan and GeoMate Brand 44 Colorado, we had too much feedback for just one show, and we received even more after that. Thanks, we really have a great audience, and please keep those questions, comments, show ideas, and, well, just about anything else you're interested in talking about coming our way. The best ways are calling 206-350-3647, which is our voicemail line, and we love hearing your voices on the show. Or you can email us, including audio recordings, at geogearheads@cachemaniacs.com.
You know, we love getting feedback on this episode, but also for the next couple of shows. Next week, we're going to talk about using Dropbox for geocaching, including things like syncing GPX files for personal use and how to use it for events and group caching. We'd love to hear how you're using it and any similar cloud storage products in your caching, just like JR and Juju did last week's show, which prompted this upcoming topic. The following week, for show 51, we'll be joined by AZ Tech of the Neon Geo forums to talk about Neon Geo. Drop us a voicemail or note about how you use Neon Geo, or any questions about that Android caching app for the next show.
You can send those in to us through social media like Google Plus or Cacheface, by email, or like this cacher did, by calling our voicemail line at 206-350-3647.
Hi, this is Dudley Grunt. I'm calling in response to a call from Jersey Eric on GeoGearHeads Beta.48 Randomize VIII about cross-listing caches. I'm on different sites. I am a big user of the alternative geocaching sites. I'm actually also one of the admins on the Open Caching US site, or Open Caching North America. And I really don't generally think cross-listing is a great thing. Most of my caches are new caches now, either listed on only Open Caching US or occasionally on terracaching.com. I think that listing a unique cache gives you something new and unique to these other sites and reason to do them. And if you simply list them on that site plus, say, Groundspeak, for instance, I think that you're not really giving anyone a reason to use those other sites because the cache is already listed on Groundspeak. That's my general ideas, and enjoy the show. Thank you, and bye.
Well, I have to agree with my friend Dudley Grunt. Listing a cache on just one site does create a compelling reason to go use those different cache listing services. So early on, when, say, opencaching.com just came out, they encourage cross-listing just to populate the site, but now I don't think there's a reason to.
Yeah, I'd have to say that it probably depends a little bit on the situation. Like out here, we just don't have anyone using opencaching.us, and we have a few people using opencaching.com, but at best you're going to get one or two people hitting your cache in an entire year if you do just those sites. So it's the kind of thing that as much as you want to do that, just because it is something different and special, then out here we don't have it, and you're not going to get people trying those sites because there's not enough caches listed on them. So I like once every year now at this point look at those other sites to see if there's caches around, and sometimes do them, but that's been my big problem with it.
Yeah, I rely on local cachers to say, oh, have you heard of this cache on the other listing service? No, let's go find it.
Yeah, well, and the problem is they have like one cacher in the area that actually checks those other sites and would say anything about it. So I don't have that network, and he's not on social networks really, so
right.
It just doesn't really work for me.
Yeah, it depends on the area. And I know down in Texas with oh boy, a couple of cachers down there that I can't remember their names. I apologize.
Texan is the one
there you
know
go.
Of who does a lot.
And I want to say big guy in Texas as well. Do a lot on opencaching.us.
Well,
So
and don't forget
it's very
that that's
popular
also the
there.
home of Munzie.
Yes.
So there is a big interest in those alternate location gaming type things down there. So yeah, and that's where Gowalla was born and died, and
lived its entire life.
yeah, until it got gobbled up by Facebook and killed.
Yeah, isn't that the case anymore?
Yeah. Well, we'll move on to Ripper Jack, 369 of Newport News, Virginia, and he wrote in saying, "Hey, I just wanted to provide some feedback on a great new series that was published on Thanksgiving Day. This series is a difficulty terrain series where there is one cache of every difficulty terrain combination. They are all true to their ratings as well. I went after the 4.5 the other day, and it was a ton of fun for me. The cache was a camelback hanging from a tree, and you had to climb up to get it. There are some others that required about a 0.2 to 0.3 mile hike through the woods, and one that we DNF'd that was protected by a briar field, which is how they got the terrain rating up on it. I have also heard some of the Terrain 5 caches require a kayak. Anyway, just wanted to provide that feedback and to enter in the contest." Well, thanks a lot. That is very, very cool. I'd love to see some of those around here, because especially when you get that 4.5. People don't want to do the 4.5. They just go all the way up to 5.
Exactly. So if it's every combination, that means there's 81 caches.
Yeah.
That's a big series.
I would hope that whomever placed that series had some help, but it's entirely possible they did it on their own.
Mm-hmm. Really cool. I've always wondered about tossing a container out into a briar field, and just to see who would go find it.
Yeah, but I'm thinking that would be an interesting cacher to talk to, or group of cachers to talk to. So Ripper Jack, if you can get back with us, let us know what at least one of those caches are, so that we can try to get in touch with the cache hider, or group of cache hiders.
Right.
Yeah, we'd love to hear more about that and get a feeling for what it took to put that out and share it with the rest of the audience.
Yeah. Now, our next piece of feedback comes via Google Plus from my friend, the Wooden Radio. He says, "Consider carrying spare plastic grocery bags to use as camo. Not camo for the cache, but camo for the cacher. Who's going to question somebody looking under a park bench when they're picking up garbage as well? This way, you can find a cache and do a little CETO as well."
Yeah,
so
great
really
thing to do anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I have to admit that we got out of doing that. We were doing it like every time we went out, we brought a bag and did some trash pickup. But once we got the bigger numbers going, that just started to seem a little bit too much of a distraction, and we got into the caching more than the cleanup.
Cleaning. Yep, exactly.
Though I have to admit, it was also about the time when we started hitting those, we're only about 50 feet in and our trash bag is full.
Yeah, that's not a lot of fun.
No. Well, and you've also already wasted, 10, 15 minutes doing it. But
not wasted, invested.
Yeah, there you go. You've invested 10, 15 minutes on a LPC picking up the trash around it. So, yeah, I'm not a big CETO person anymore. I love doing the CETO events, but
right.
I hate to admit that I just don't do it much on the trail anymore. And when I got into it, I was still, if we were walking someplace, I'd pick up the trash off the floor. I do that at the mall even,
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, when we've got out caching, we just don't do it like we used to.
Well, Daryl, as I get older, I realize the floor is much lower than it used to be. Maybe that's the issue.
No, I guarantee that that's not the issue.
Oh, okay.
It's a fatigue of picking up too much trash. It's a totally different thing. If I'm going out caching, I'm going out to find caches. It's almost like what we've talked about before with going out to find caches and Munzies. It's really tough to switch back and forth.
Right.
You want to do one or the other. So if I'm going out for a CETO, we're out there to do the CETO. And I don't worry about the caches until I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention, so much of this trash is just dirty. So if you don't have the gloves on,
mm-hmm.
you don't want to be touching anything afterward.
Right.
You got to, so you got to have the hand sanitizer and all that kind of stuff. So, it's a pain to get involved, but I really encourage everyone to do it. I used to do it, and I'm going to make an effort to start doing it again.
We're going to guilt you back into it.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to be a problem because I already feel guilty about it. And quite honestly, even before he sent this comment in, I was thinking, I really need to start picking up the trash again and bringing a bag to do it, because that's the other problem. So lately when I go caching, it's just walking around here and there as I'm doing shopping or whatever. So you're not really out caching. You're out doing something else, and you happen upon a big pile of trash. It's just like, man, I wish I had my little grocery bags out here with me.
Yeah, I do like putting grocery bags into film canisters in a larger cache.
Yes.
So the if they pick it up, then they have something to do some CETO on the way out.
Yeah, agreed. I do that, or I used to do that. I tried doing that a little while ago, and found that no one around us has film processing labs anymore.
They're getting harder to find.
Yeah, and the ones that do are telling me that they don't really get the film canisters anymore. People are just bringing in the rolls of film, because it's gotten to the point where those little canisters are kind of getting precious in this area because everyone has gone digital.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on to a comment from Nighthawk 700 that he had sent in via Google+. And he wanted us to talk about how many geocaching games do you think there are? For example, he has a hot potato contest between Maryland and Virginia. There's a travel bug connected to a small Mr. Potato Head figure. The Maryland team tries to take it and put it in Virginia, and the Virginia team tries to take it and put it in Maryland. The goal is to try to put it in difficult, far-off caches to make it hard for the other team to recover and move. Points are awarded to teams for the number of days the TB spends in the opponent's territory. Individual caches are allowed 2 moves per quarter, where a pickup is a move and drop-off is 1 move. We did have a recent problem where a traveling cacher happened upon the TB before it was picked up by the opposing team and dropped it into a Florida cache despite the note attached to it, asking it not be taken out of Maryland or Virginia. Fortunately, someone else in Florida got it and mailed it back for gameplay. I wondered if there are any familiar types of games or any similar types of games being played elsewhere, and he also provided a link to the hot potato, which is TB14QBR.
That sounds like a lot of fun. I've never considered that.
Well, one of the first travel bugs that we actually encountered in the wild was a hat for one of the cachers that he had left or lost somewhere and wanted back or destroyed or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was. So it was a travel bug that had to be kept away from that cacher. So that was way back in 2005, and that wasn't the first traveler like that. They, when I mentioned it, because we were just getting into it and had to, understand what this story was, it was explained to us that, oh no, there were several of those. So there's a bunch of those with the caches like that, or with the travelers like that. And here we used to do cache container. The caching place used to actually set up games where you had to meet certain criteria. And I know in Australia they do a ton of those kind of games. They'll do the moving caches. They have one of those going on right now. I believe it's based on frogs right now, but I can't remember. But they do a ton of those games down in Australia. So there are so many of them that I couldn't even begin to fathom how many games there are, especially when you start taking into account the individual contests and stuff that people are doing for events or just in between with themselves.
Or travel bug races. Same kind of idea there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, yeah, it just adds to the whole game of geocaching that people with their great creativity adds a different spin to it.
Yeah, that's one of those things I really wish at least some of the more common things like the travel bug races were better supported through geocaching.com. And I kind of hope that someone would put together a website to kind of fill that void using the new API.
No,
But
that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, well, again, I'm not sure how much functionality there is available to the developers for things like trackables, and how you would come up with a good, design for that. So it's not going to be an easy one, but I would love to see someone do that. And there might be one that we just haven't heard about yet. And if so, please call or write in and let us know what that is.
Without a doubt, we gotta find what that is. Now, there's more feedback. This is a whole feedback show from Urban Geo 53 from Southwestern Ohio. Wrote via email. I'm not sure if this is already an answered question, but is there a website, app, or program to pull the map from geocaching.com and print the map with the listing names and locations to have in hand while caching in the field? Thanks for any help. Wow.
Yeah, that's a good one. We had a whole discussion on Google Plus this afternoon about it with a few different folks. The only way that I've done it hasn't been very easy. But one of the things that came up in the discussion on Google Plus, and kind of my first reaction was as much a joke as anything else, was, who uses paper to go caching anymore? But no, it is a very good situation to have. Or a very good backup to have if you're in the situation where you're going to be out in areas where you might get lost, you might not have good reception. If you're under heavy tree cover,
right?
You might not get good reception, and that map might come in handy. You might be somewhere where you're hiking for quite a long time and don't want to risk running down the battery, so that map comes in handy, or just you have one GPS and want to make sure you have a backup. But more than that, we do it here for the new caches placed for events. And most of the time when I've done these, I've worked with the hiders, with the event organizers, and we've actually put together a booklet. We usually don't do a map on those. We had done it a few times, which we did print to a PDF and then just included that PDF in the booklet, with everything on the map from either Google Earth or Streets and Trips or whatever different map app we had, and then everything tied back to the full text descriptions. But we couldn't come up with anything that was easy to do. So we were doing this big, long, involved process.
Well, I know I've used Streets and Trips or Map Point, same idea, both Microsoft products, and they can accept a GPX file from geocaching.com. So I've been able to do an export and import that directly into, in this case, Map Point is what I tend to use at work more than Streets and Trips. And it will do that. I had forgotten about that until you brought it up.
Well, does it actually put together a list of the caches, or does it just put the cache names under the waypoints?
It will list the names because you can route to them. So it'll tell you the name you're routing to next.
Okay, but we're talking
along the side.
You're printing it, though.
Right. When you're printing it, you can print out. You can have an output. I've seen this we have around here what we call cache machines, where we may hit 100 caches in a day, and there's a map to follow. So we're all going to this cache and this cache and this cache.
So you'd have to put together a route to get it, but that might be exactly what he's looking for then.
Right, and it will show them all on a map. It'll route to them, or you may not have to route. I know with MapPoint I can bring it up and just show the individual points and put either the GC number or the name on each pin. So
very cool.
So yeah, that just came off the top of my head. So MapPoint is what I'm used to using. I don't know if Streets and Trips has that same functionality.
Yeah, no, I don't know either, but that's a good one to check out then. DeBear mentioned that he uses Google Earth just as like offline not necessarily for even printing, but that's a good one. Nighthawk 700 mentioned that he thought you might be able to do something with GSAC, maybe a macro, and we got into a big, long discussion on that one, talking largely that we didn't think that you could do the map at all. Printing, they came up with, wasn't much of a problem, but my thought was maybe someone could write a macro that actually like exported a web page or something. And by doing the web page export, then you could print that page.
Well, GSAC was my first thought. I know there's a Google Map macro that will take your at least the current cache you're looking at and place it on a Google Map, and from there you can just do a print screen if it doesn't print properly. I don't know if you can take a listing of caches and overlay that on a Google Map. It shouldn't be hard. I know in Google Earth you can drop a GPX file onto it, and it will plot them all out for you.
Right, which is what DeBear was getting at. The other one that we had was Clark on Google Plus mentioned that DeLorme's Topo North America software will print out a custom map downloaded from geocaching.com showing the caches with their names, but it does not show the coordinates. So that might be a solution to this problem, is to just use that, another good option. But no one came up with any one good solution for this problem. So again, if you have any kind of solution, any kind of way to address this, we'd love to hear it. So write or call in with that, because anything would help. And like we said, this is a great idea. You get some of that adventure paper or the Write in the Rain, and it's something that's going to withstand. They even have the little map pouches that you can throw the printed maps into, and it's good backup to have when you're in the field.
Right. This week I'll pull up MapPoint, which I use, and see how well it works. I'll be able to include screenshots. We'll have that in the next week's show notes.
Sounds good.
Okay, moving on. We have feedback from Kenna for you via email. It says, "Hey guys, I was wondering what types of products are used to reflect the UV light." So last week we talked about small UV lights. Actually, a couple of shows ago, our gift guide.
Well, it was an idea that came up in last week's Randomize show too.
No, there we go. Are there paints or markers, and what are some of the concerns when using these types of products? For example, are they hazardous? Do they need to be applied to a certain media, or need a lot of reapplication if exposed to the elements? I hope you can enlighten me. I like the pun there. Get it? UV light, enlighten. Thanks for the podcast. As a newbie cacher, I've learned so much about placing and maintaining my caches.
Well, I'm glad that we were able to enlighten him. And I did do a little bit of research before the show, because I know there are a bunch of different options out there. There's a bunch of UV reactive paints and pens, and just about anything that you want you can get in some kind of UV reactive material. And they'll not necessarily react in the same way, because some of the UV reactive material is visible in full spectrum light, but it won't. And then there's others that aren't available or that aren't visible except under UV light. And that's the kind of stuff that we're usually talking about, where it's actually invisible to the naked eye when using your full spectrum like sunlight. And that's typically called some kind of security marker or security paint or something like that. But there's such a wide variety out there that we'd probably have to get someone who really knows this stuff on the show to talk about the various types and what happens with what. But looking around, it is really inexpensive to get some plain old markers that are very much like Sharpies. They actually refer to them as being Sharpie style markers. And my guess is, from my limited experience, that they're not really going to last very well if they're exposed to the elements. But if you're going to put that in something, it's going to be perfectly fine. And I know that there are paints for the security stuff and some inks. I'm assuming that's not going to be the type in those markers that will react or that will withstand very well. But again, I don't know what the toxicity of this stuff is, when it starts to run or flake off or something like that. And that I wasn't able to find anything on when I did my research this afternoon. But I'm sure if we got specific products and looked into it, we could probably get a little bit more information about it.
Right. I'm actually looking it up right now. There's, like you said, pens and a small paint. It looks like a nail polish bottle. So that size of paint that's designed, for UV. It's designed to work with a certain wavelength. Yeah. So that's an important thing to know.
Yeah, definitely. And there's the, all kinds of different paints, enamels, inks. So there's all kinds of stuff out there. Mm-hmm. Finding it in, the flavor that you want and all that might be a little bit difficult. But, I don't think from what I've seen that you're going to have a problem finding the stuff. However,
exactly.
My expectation is the stuff that holds up better in most of the weather is going to be more toxic when it does start to degrade. So that might be a concern. And again, I'd love to get someone who really knows this stuff on the show. So if anyone knows a cacher who's really experienced with UV, let us know who that is, and we'll try to get them on and do a show on UV.
There you go. I know somebody. I'll see if they'll come on the show.
That sounds great. Let's move on to nut feedback. So this is not something that came from anyone, which is actually a news item. We did mention it in the latest edition of Cacheline, and that has been Groundspeak is retiring the geocaching challenges. And that's not the challenges. That's the geocaching, not the challenge caches. It's the geocaching challenges. That's that separate piece with that separate counter with the separate apps.
Right. It's not challenges. It's challenges.
Yeah.
Which, I admit, not the best name. But I did a few. I think I have 6 to my credit. And,
I have 2.
It's not one of those things that, wow, thrilled me. I did one. I set up a challenge the day they came out, the geocaching block party 2 years ago. Simply was come up to my stand at the geocaching block party, tell me your favorite Northwest cache. And I had, 400 people show up to do the challenge. So, wow. It was brand new. Everybody was excited. Great. And, from that point on, there was a very vocal negative minority on geocaching challenges.
Well, yeah, there was a lot of pushback initially, and there were several problems that I think kind of doomed the public reaction to it. When they started out with the geocaching challenges, the first problem was, well, what's this when you have challenge caches? What's the difference? I don't understand. And that was a major problem, is that people really did get confused. And then there were a lot of people who didn't want the caches to be included in the caching or the geocaching challenges
to be included in the geocaching count.
Geocaching fine count. So that changed it right away. And I think once they pulled that out, it removed the motivation that a lot of cachers had to actually try it, because, well, it's not going to count toward my fine, so why bother?
Exactly. And, it was a separate app to begin with, which I think was engineered that way. It was another entry vehicle into geocaching.
Yeah, well, but I think that's also part of the problem, is because it was a separate app, it gets into that whole Munzie type thing again. You didn't see and you couldn't get a map of where these were.
No.
So it was really tough to go and seek them out, kind of like waymarking. Is where at least you had an app for this. When they came up with the waymarking, and it's still just an ugly stepchild kind of thing. You didn't have a good way to figure out where these were so that you could do them while you're out caching. So this is actually worse than like trying to do Munzies and caches. Now you've got this totally separate thing with 2 separate apps. You have to really try to go after them. You didn't have a nice way to find them. So I'm not surprised that they've decided to retire it. I just hope that this is a vehicle to either bring back some development for Where I Go, or maybe another opportunity for them to revisit virtual caches and bring those back in a way that makes more sense. Yeah,
Right.
I'd love to see virtuals. I'm a huge fan, as everyone knows, of virtuals, but I do understand why they had to go. And I'm glad they grandfathered in the ones that were there, but we're starting to see a lot of really bad virtual caches starting to pop up.
Oh yeah.
You know, look at what happened to waymarking. Waymarking is a perfect example of why virtuals were at that point where they were no longer sustainable.
Right.
So if they could come up with some way to make them work, and I think part of that might be to have some kind of online quiz that you have to complete to actually log the cache, kind of like what opencaching.us does, with you have to have a password. Have them go out there, get this word, and that's your password to log the cache.
Right. So that you've actually been to the site. You went out and you found something.
Yeah, well, it might not actually say that you've been to the site because you can get it from someone else.
Well, I know, but
it's more than just, oh, hey, here's a virtual cache. I'm going to log it.
Yeah. I mean, you could, have somebody go out and sign your name to caches as well. I mean, there's ways to increase your numbers by what I call cheating.
Yeah.
But, it's the people are going to play the game the way they're going to play the game. I'm not well, I am the bad cop, but I'm not setting the rules on this.
Yeah, the ones that really bug me are the guys who just go through and, I found 150 caches in a day. Yes, but you never got out of the car, or worse yet, you never left the house.
Exactly.
And we have seen some of those, and that's caused some major issues around here.
So, okay, challenges are gone. So what? How much longer is waymarking going to be left on life support?
Yeah, I don't know. Waymarking, it does seem to have some interested people, but I think it's a tiny little community, and I don't know that it's really costing them too much, and maybe they have a grand plan in the future where they can mine that for data, because they did have the Historic Places app at one point for the iPhone, which pulled the waymark information. So, maybe there's some grand plan that's going to be used for something like their own version of Ingress in the future.
Oh, you had to bring that up, didn't you?
Yeah, that's been the hot thing, We won't go there, though.
We won't go there. Not tonight. Okay. Do we want to go on to the next topic?
Yeah, let's continue on a little bit more, because we're only at about half an hour.
Okay. There's another link here. Salvage that water-damaged phone from mobile apps for biz. And
this goes back to our Beta.44, but it's a different technique than what we had talked about, and they've had some success with it. Yeah. So we'll have to drop that link in there.
Exactly.
But, I'm hoping to never have to test this, but it did look like it might be a little bit more complex than some of the stuff we talked about, but more thorough.
I don't think it's any more complex. Well, the steps is disassemble the phone as much as you can. Obviously, with the iPhones, there's nothing you can do. Some of the Androids, pull off the back, the battery, do what you can. The next one is get alcohol. And I'm not talking tequila. I'm talking 99% isopropyl alcohol. You can get it, at the big box drugstores, and it's usually easy to come by. Don't get the scented ones. Get just the plain alcohol.
Well, and it has to be the 99%.
Right.
Now, and this is one of the things we used to use this stuff to clean heads of video decks all the time when I was working in that biz.
I used it for printers years ago.
Yeah, and it's a great cleaning supplies. A lot of people use it for cleaning the mag stripe readers on their terminals. It's anything that has a magnetic head. This stuff is what you'd want to use. And in some states, they're not allowed to sell it in drugstores.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
They're limited to, I think it's 85% in a couple of the states that I know of. So you will find in some cases you're not going to find the 99%. So what you can do as the alternative is run to an electronics store and get the head cleaner, which is usually the same thing.
Okay.
But because it's not for medical purposes, it's for cleaning heads of electronics, they can get away selling it.
Right. Well, you're probably going to need a lot more of that because it should come in a smaller bottle. However, you need enough to fully submerge your phone.
Yep.
So you want to put this in a container of some sort and fully submerge your phone in it, and then just walk away. Let it set for about an hour. And then dry off what you can. Give it a few hours to dry out inside. That alcohol is going to drive the water out. It'll displace all the water, and then it will dry, what do I want to say, with no residue? I want to say completely clean. But
yeah, the point is really, in this scenario, I think, a lot of the trouble that you'll have with the phone after it dries is that you'll get the mineral deposits, which will cause some problems. And it's not just minerals, but minerals are real common. Yeah. And by using the alcohol, you're essentially cleaning all of the minerals and stuff off the boards and anywhere that the water might have gotten, displace the water, and hopefully you'll end up drying better and faster than the water would.
Right. So,
it's I still like the throw it in the bag of rice trick. And I don't think if you get your phone wet, you're going to have much luck salvaging it anyway.
Right. Well,
you might get your data and stuff up, but don't plan on that being a good working phone after the fact.
And I failed to mention that don't turn your phone on before you do this. If it's wet, leave it off. And don't turn it on when it's in the alcohol. Leave it off or as off as you can get it.
Yeah.
And then do this process.
Yeah, that is the first thing with any of these. And if you have one of the phones that doesn't have the removable battery, we talked about that earlier, you're probably better off to just not touch the phone. And that's one of the problems that I have with this method is you're risking, you don't want to resubmerge the phone if it's still on. So by turning the phone on to turn it off, I think you're risking more damage. But I don't know, it might be a solution. Take a look at the quick article. It's not that long. If you have the removable battery, it's probably worth looking at doing this. If you don't have a removable battery, which is more and more common, then I would probably suggest to not try this and look back at Beta.40 and some of the ideas that we had talked about there with Andy and Akko.
So, Daryl, are you saying don't try this at home?
I am indeed saying don't try this. Once you drop your phone in the water, you're pretty much hosed anyway. Don't expect it to come back. But there are some things you can do to at least hopefully get the data out. And I have heard from some people who have had success with like the rice trick of bringing their phones back from the dead, and they're actually able to use them. One of the things with, it's kind of ironic, but one of the things with the phones that are sealed batteries where you can't open it is they are sealed better. So typically if they're dropped in the water, they don't suffer the internal damage that you'll have with a phone that has the removable battery. They're sealed. That's one of the reasons why they do that is because they can seal them better. So it's kind of one of those, the removable battery is nice because you can pull the power and you can change the batteries and all that kind of stuff, but by sealing the phone, you're making it more weatherproofed, you're making it more user-proof.
Right, exactly. Which may not be a bad thing, but if it goes south, there's nothing you can do.
Yeah, exactly. Now, another one that we're going to drop in this show is a quick mention, because it just happened today as we're recording and haven't done too much to play with it. But Google Plus is debuting new communities on their site today. We don't really have a good grasp at this point of what those communities are like. I just got the communities feature about, I'd say about 20 minutes before we started recording. And my initial reaction is I don't like the notifications, and it's going to drive me nuts. And the way that they handle the notifications, it's either all on or all off for the communities. So I'm thinking that this is going to be something they're going to fix. I just hope they do it quickly, because with the way that it's handled right now, I think people are going to get really turned off and right off the communities very quickly. But I've already been invited to at least one geocaching community, and I suspect we're going to see a lot more of those forming. And I think for from what I've seen of it, because again I haven't really seen it too much, but from the little bit I've seen, this is going to be a great solution if you have your little group of 6 or 10 different teams that like to go caching occasionally together. Put together your own little private group. You can have your own little discussions, set up your own little events, and it's just going to be a really quick, handy way to put together those events of going out for a caching day or weekend, or even maybe some bigger caching trips. So I think this is going to be something that cachers are really going to get into if they can get some of these issues addressed.
Right. And I did want to point out there are private and public groups. You can, when you set up a group, you can determine which one you want it to be. So those public group or those private groups may be good even just for families.
Absolutely.
You've got a kid away off at college and another one starting a career and a family. Have the group together. It's your own private chat.
Yeah, I can definitely see, church groups getting involved in this kind of stuff, especially if you have like a little committee for, a nonprofit or something, a great way to do that, and it does tie into the Hangouts, which is Google Plus's big thing. But I'm just looking at this, from the caching perspective. I think we've got a lot of really cool opportunities here, including maybe some, specific gadget cache community where WV Tim would set up a gadget cache group or community, and you share your experiences with the gadget caches, and maybe that would help him out a little bit. And again, it could be a private community that he has to invite you into once he's vetted you and made sure that you're not someone who just wants to cheat or whatever. So maybe you have we talked about the games earlier. Maybe you set up a Google Plus community group of the people who are going to be playing that particular game. So all kinds of interesting stuff. And it's not too indifferent from the other types of groups we've seen on other social media platforms, but it is an interesting new feature that's been long overdue, in my opinion.
Right.
And I'm glad to see that it's there, but we have to see how it's going to work and really get some experience. But again, most of our feedback for the show does come from Google Plus. There's a great community there, so I think for most of our listeners, this is going to be something that they really want to look into.
I agree with you, and I haven't done that much investigation in it, but we'll let you know as details emerge.
Indeed. And one last story we wanted to talk about that comes to us from Engadget, the title of which is Qualcomm announces cheap, battery-efficient NFC chip, hopes to put it in phones next year. Now, this one got me excited because we were talked about one of the problems with NFC has been that battery drain. Well, if Qualcomm has come up with a cheap and more efficient NFC chip, well, that might be what we need to really start pushing manufacturers to get, especially the price, if it's 2-3 cents for them to throw it in, of course they're going to just add it in because it's another feature.
Right.
But being more battery efficient is, the battery efficiency on the phones has really become a big issue. And that's one of the main reasons that people have not thrown it in, is that it is such a drain on the batteries, from what I'm told. The phones that don't have it, they're trying to make sure that it's a longer lived phone, that it's more stable. They don't want any interference. They don't want that extra drain. So I'm hoping that this Qualcomm chip might expand NFC, and we could start seeing, maybe even an NFC iPhone.
Well, I wouldn't keep your hopes up for that, but you never know. Now,
No, I'm definitely not keeping my hopes up.
Of course, adding more features to a phone causes it to go through battery life quicker. So, little things like this, being able to be more battery efficient in just one chip does make a big difference.
Right. Well, and because of the way NFC worked, it's not going to be as battery efficient as like Bluetooth 4. So maybe by making some changes in the chip, in the radios and whatnot that they're using, actually, I don't know a whole lot about the way they're using that, but I should think that just like Bluetooth 4, they were able to change the way all that stuff worked and the way the protocols worked to strip down the battery usage. They could probably do that same kind of thing with the NFC chips without doing too much damage to the protocols, as it were.
I'm sure. And we'll find out more in the future as well.
So that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Join us next week as we talk about Dropbox for cachers. Check the Cacheamaniacs website at cacheamaniacs.com for more on the GeoGearHeads, including show notes for this and all of our episodes. We love hearing from our listeners, so leave us feedback by calling 206-350-3647, by emailing geogearheads@cacheamaniacs.com, or through social media. Your support helps keep these shows coming. Please consider making a PayPal donation through the link on our website to support the Cacheamaniac shows. GeoGearHeads is produced by Chris Offenauer and Daryl Wattenberg. Our show is copyright 2012 by Daryl Wattenberg. All rights reserved.
Cash with the Cacheamaniacs.